Okay, so here is my first attempt at requeening the Carniolans. These bees have been queenless for 3 days now. This poor queen has been in this queen cage since Monday. It is now Saturday. And I removed all of her attendants because I didn't want to see the unwelcome and fighting behavior between the screen that I saw when I tried to requeen my Caucasians. This is the last queen that I have in a cage, and so far I think things look okay. It looks really excited, but I'm not seeing bees bent in half trying to sting her. I'm also kind of worried about how hyper it is. But I went ahead and removed her attendants. There's really no going back. She can't survive in that cage any longer. Even with attendants, another day would be very doubtful. So I'm gonna go ahead and pry the frames apart and wedge her cage in and see if we can get some acceptance for this queen. Won't know until I check back. I'm unclear if I should check back in 3 days or 7 days, but I went ahead and removed the plug from the candy in of her queen cage, and now I'm just over here trying to wedge these frames as far apart as possible without upsetting any bee, so I can wedge her cage in the wax and get it trapped in there so that these workers have continual access to her screen and to the candy cork. Get out of there, little worker. You don't want to be trapped in there, dude. Okay, got that side wedged apart. Let's get this side wedged apart. These Carniolans had an awesome queen. It was very sad for me to pinch her. She was very productive. She laid in a perfect pattern. However, because Carniolans are not naturally inclined to handle really any sort of mite besides trachea mites, hi. That's why I decided to requeen this colony with a BeeWeaver survivor queen, because colonies headed by BeeWeaver survivor queens don't need any mite treatment. That apiary has been completely treatment free for a long time now, many years, over a decade. I want to say since 2009, but I might be misquoting. I'd have to go double check the literature again. But basically, all I want to do here is slide this queen cage in between slow enough and calm enough that I don't upset anybody. And I don't know if you can see it, but I went ahead and pre-drilled a little hole in the candy plug so that they can have an easier time at freeing her. I'll have to go back and re-watch this video because of course I had to be paying attention to what I was doing with my hive tool separating these frames, but I don't believe that I saw any aggression towards this queen, and I think, hello little girl, there you go. I think that removing the queen's attendants from the cage really helped with that. I'm never going to try to requeen with the attendants still in the cage again. I think that agitated the situation in my other hive. I just didn't like it. So even though please excuse that excessive show of being penis size challenged. I do live in the city right next to a very busy street, and that's why it's really important to me that I only have gentle bees. Because of that, I was nervous about getting my BeeWeaver queen last year. I was worried that I might end up with a hot queen, because on occasion that does still happen with bees bred in southern states, because there are Africanized genetics living in those areas. But the BeeWeaver family takes great care to select for gentler and gentler temperament. Every generation they raise comes, every generations that they bring up from their line come out gentler and gentler every year. I've seen enough of Frederick Dunn's videos on YouTube's to feel confident that I can have gentle enough bees going even with the Survivor line, because his bees are super chill in his videos most of the time. And he does mostly BeeWeaver stock. He is experimenting right now with some Saskatraz, but he had BeeWeaver stock for over 8 years, which is what convinced me to try it. For some reason, this frame isn't wanting to sit down properly. Poor little smashed bees. This is the thing that I like least about this hive design. It's inspired by Michael Palmer's double nucleus colonies, but I did modify it a bit to kind of trick out the design. I wanted screened bottom boards on both of the colonies so I could better monitor varroa population. And so I purchased pre-made screen bottom boards for 5-frame nukes, and then I custom fabricated the brood box down there to fit the screen bottom boards side by side. But what ended up happening was it was so much wider than Michael Palmer's actual plans that there's actually 6 frames on each side in the brood box in this hive, but then each super is a prefabricated 5-frame nuke box. I'm alternating mediums and deeps because I actually prefer managing medium-sized hive bodies, because I have physical challenges that affect my strength, and it actually makes it pretty hard on me to do full hive inspections, especially with a full deep frame of honey. Oh my goodness, those are heavy and awkward for me, and I end up hurting for a few days afterwards because I have carpal tunnel syndrome and fibromyalgia. Look at this little girl on my thumb. You know what she's doing? She's nassonoving. There's one inside right there nassonoving as well, and they are telling everybody in this hive, hey, good news, we have a new queen now. 1, 2, 3 nassonovers right in a row. 4, there's a 4th one. This is a really good sign. This is encouraging to me. I'm actually excited about this introduction. I actually think that they're going to accept this queen, and I am really worried about the queen that I put on the Caucasian hive. Didn't witness nassonoving when I introduced her, and it made me worried that she was not going to be accepted. And that could be error on my part. That's an empty dolman top feeder. It's basically the same design as the Rapid Round, but it's narrower. It's said to be able to fit inside these 5-frame nukes, but I actually had to shave quite a bit of width off the inside of my nuke body to be able to fit that top feeder in, but I have an electric sander with 60 grit sandpaper. It made very short work of it. So now we're just trying to put the hive back together without upsetting or crushing anyone. Go on, little Nasinover. There you go. Okay, let's get it all lined up perfectly. And I do not have syrup in my hive feeders right now because I've just been so busy with work and the pinching of the old queens, and it just feels like I just haven't had time to keep on top of it. And one thing that I learned from Michael Bush, who is an unconventional commercial beekeeper, but I think something of value that I did learn from his teachings is that if you're going to feed one of your colonies, you should have sugar syrup on all of them, because you could actually trigger a robbing response from your stronger colonies on that weaker colony that you're feeding. Now, I don't know if it's necessary to continue feeding at this point in the game. I had feed on all of my colonies because I wanted, let's see if I can do this with the phone in my hand. I wanted my Caucasians to be drawing out comb faster, and I wanted this double nuke to draw out comb fast because these were brand new colonies this year. The green side was the split that I made from my survivor bees, and that I successfully hard released a free Caucasian queen I was sent to make up for the lame Caucasian nucleus colony I purchased in my ignorance last year. The seller has a strict no refunds policy, but after he received some online pressure from some people on an online beekeeping forum that I showed pictures of that nuke colony after it was just dwindling away after a few weeks. And I was like, help, I don't know what to do to save these bees. There's something wrong. They all said that wasn't even enough bees to fill a 2-frame nuke. How in the world did he try to sell that to you as a 5-frame nuke? And, you know, I had to prepay. And I drove clear across the state 5 hours to pick them up. I was the last person to arrive that day, so I was given the weakest nucleus colony he had available. And I didn't know what I was looking at. I was too inexperienced. I didn't have an experienced bee mentor with me to lay eyes on it. And so even though he said, this is a lot weaker than I'd like to see it be, this is the only one we have left, and you've already paid and we don't do refunds. So you could either bring it home with you and see if you can get it to thrive, or you can just leave it with us and you can come pick up a new nucleus colony next season. And I wasn't going to waste all that time and gas money to leave this hive of Caucasians I was super excited about getting. And I was a little bit cocky and thought for sure with all of my loving care and attention I'd be able to get those Caucasians to survive. And well, that did happen. The Caucasians did end up surviving the winter, but it was only because I was fortunate enough to get a local bee mentor after I posted pictures of that failing colony on this online beekeeping forum. He said, hey, I live a half an hour away from you. I'd like to come and do an inspection on that hive and see if I can identify why it's failing. And I said, of course, internet stranger, come to my home, learn my address. I don't know you from Adam, but bees, so do it. Luckily for me and my family, he was a very kind man who brought 2 frames of capped brood from his own apiary, and after we went through the Caucasians, he determined that it was a good laying queen. That wasn't the source of the problems. and that I had just given them too much space to defend by putting this super tiny nucleus colony into a 10 frame box. They had become sort of depressed at not being able to defend all of those frames with such a tiny population. And so he determined that just giving me those 2 frames of cat brood, and also he gave me a follower board to close off half of the 10 frames in that hive to essentially give them a 5 frame nuke to get used to and defend and build up their population. And I was able to remove that follower board after about 3 weeks because the population just really boomed with his brood infusion, and they slowly and steadily built up over the year, but they never built up to a full strength colony before winter hit, and I was convinced they were not going to make it through the winter. Somehow miraculously they survived, even though all they had was 10 deep frames, and they made it through our very cold, harsh winter and came out and started building up again this year. But I decided that they just weren't building up as fast or as vigorously as I wanted to see them do, as my BeeWeaver survivor colony was doing. So I just said, to heck with it, I'm going to requeen my entire population with BeeWeaver queens. So that's what I'm attempting to do this week. Has been very stressful and exhausting for me. I haven't been able to sleep at night because of the anxiety of pinching those queens. That was very brutal. I've always had a deep love for bees. I know they're just insects, but I actually pulled out their queens and drowned them in alcohol so that I could use them in the future for their pheromone, to possibly lure swarms or to keep one of these colonies in their hive if they end up rejecting these new queens and I can't get a replacement in a timely manner. So those 2 queens that I pinched hopefully won't have died in vain, and hopefully I'll have effective varroa management throughout my apiary, because the last time I did an inspection on this double nuke, I actually saw my first epiphytic varroa destructor mite living fat and happy on one of these worker bees, and that was really the straw that broke this camel's back. I was like, that's it. I know that BeeWeaver bees pick up mites while they're out foraging, but they don't let them live in their hives. They set up little foraging stations, and every time a worker returns with a varroa on them, the foraging stations are set up just inside the hive. The cleaner bees inside just groom the forager from head to toe and remove any unwanted hitchhikers, so it doesn't even get a chance to lay eggs in the developing brood inside the hive. And so that's where I'm at. So hopefully when I check back in either 3 or 7 days, still have to figure out the correct answer to that one. Oh, I don't have the lid on all the way. Anyway, hopefully when I check back, I will see that this queen has been released and that there are eggs present, because that's the sign that she has been fully accepted. And then I'll just close the hive up again real quick and try to be as little invasive as possible until she really has a chance to set up her brood box. Of the 3 queens that I've introduced this week, this is the one that I feel the most hopeful for acceptance, but we shall see. Bye-bye.